to the Early Weigh-In Podcast, second episode of the year, and glad to finally have you back sitting next to me talking some good old-fashioned fist fights here. UFC 270 this weekend, man, and although the card from top to bottom doesn't have all that too,
it's a little top heavy.
It is, but you're right, man. That co-main event, main event, some absolute killer fights, man. And in the co-main, it's the trilogy fight between Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno's got the win. Figgy retained his belt, but technically a draw. So I don't really know if it's technically considered a trilogy here, but it's going to be a really good fight. And then in the main event, it's one of the biggest heavyweight fights that come to mind for me, bigger than any DC or Stipe fight in the past. You got former training partners in Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou now fighting for the belt. And did Francis move to the United States because he wasn't the best man in the room anymore? Or, maybe the coaching attention wasn't all on him anymore? Guess we're going to find out on Saturday. And like I said, it's one of the more anticipated fights that I've been looking forward to. Before we go over last week, do us a quick favor. Throw the video a quick like, sub to the channel if you haven't. You got me wearing the hat over Jake Collier whooping up on Chase Sherman, man. That looked like, honestly, one of the easiest bets on the entire card. And from the first exchange, I knew I was absolutely doomed.
It was weird because that was a fight where I know a lot of people were on the over 2.5 sitting at minus 160. And looking back on it, man, paying that price for heavyweights.
I know. Bound to have a finish sometime, know. And, man, once it got to the mat, Jake Collier just absolutely ran through him. And, being
maybe heavyweight is his weight class now.
For real. And he's definitely carrying the middleweight speed with him up there. And, not going to carry him to the top, but you give to more of these low-level heavyweights, and I think it's going to be similar results, to be honest with you. I can't really complain too much, though. We had two bets. We told you it was a tricky card, a whole lot of closely aligned fights, contender series making debuts, but thought we were mature with picking two picks, and we came out on top.
We sweep the board. We started off with our first one being the Dakota Bush versus Valashev-Borishev fight doesn't go the distance.
First round.
Never had to sweat it. Yeah. First round, Borishev really did his thing, got a clean body shot, and we knew that fight was going to be ended early, so happy we took the fight doesn't go to decision. Like you said, showed a little bit of maturity, but we didn't even need it. Then we move on to the Royval Bontoran fight, and I don't know, it was a little bit sketchy, but we were owed one. From sure. You look at our betting history, we've gotten screwed out of a lot of stuff, and that one seems like we deserved lean our way.
I couldn't agree more. And I think we got a couple fights already locked in, a couple bets already locked in. If you want to go over those as well. Yeah,
we've got a couple. We've got a parlay that we're feeling really, really good about, in Ilia Topuria and Raoni Barcelos. We think that both those guys are absolute locks, and their price tag shows it. So parlaying them together, we still have a minus 212 price tag, but it's something that I think that we're going to take advantage of. We hit it for 3 units. Then we have a girl fight in Jasmine Jasudavicious versus Kay Hansen. We'll get more into it, but more or less, I think we have two wrestlers. One of them's much bigger and is the heavy underdog. And
we love our big girl underdogs.
We do. The other one is on the co-main event where we see Brandon Moreno and Figueiredo. Fight doesn't go to decision at minus 136. We think that that's an incredible line.
Full
and
25.
Regardless of who you think has the edge, I think Figgy has a huge finishing upside with his power. Yep. And personally, I think Moreno has Figgy's number. So I think somebody goes to sleep on Saturday. And then the last one, probably our safest play of the night. Why not take a stab on it, though? It's Gane by decision only. Really, if this fight sees the judges' scorecards, you'd be hard to convince me that Francis is going to be pointing his way to decision against one of the most technical strikers in the division. In our main event, we have Francis the Predator Ngannou taking on Cyril Gane. And damn, dude, this is an incredible matchup right here. Long time coming. And like you and I have been saying all week, it's tough to convince me that there's a sharp side to this fight right here, man. I saw somebody on Twitter say it perfectly. They mentioned that this is a muscle car versus a performance vehicle matchup. And I think that is perfectly fitting for these two. You have somebody in Francis Ngannou who more or less throws technique out the window and just uses his pure strength and power to impose his will on his opponents. Versus Gane, who's one of the more athletic and technical strikers of the division.
New breed of heavyweights.
And the new wave of heavyweights for sure. And I think that this is a coin flip fight. The closer that we get to fight night, I think more people will see Francis Ngannou's highlight reel, and that number will start to come down closer to evens. But it does make sense to me that the sharps are on Cyril Gane's money line because he has so many more ways to finish the fight. I think he's probably got the edge in grappling. He definitely has the edge in technical striking. And, you know, I think he also probably has the better gas tank. He just utilizes his weapons more efficiently. That being said, you know, it takes one shot from Francis Ngannou, and for us to just take the minus 400 Gane by decision only, I think that's our best shot. I'm happy that we're taking it.
Yeah, man, I'm 100% with you, and just to basically kind of reiterate some of the stuff you said, with the sharps on Cyril Gane, I get it, you know, I do, and I tweeted earlier this week that maybe at minus 150, I think the line really could be right because there's not really a place outside of just pure knockout power that I favor Francis in this fight. He's outclassed, like you said, in kickboxing. I trust Cyril Gane's gas tank so much more. I trust his footwork so much more, and if there is any grappling involved, yeah, I think I'm going to absolutely lean on the Gane side as well. I don't think that Gane submitting Francis late is off the table. But for the first 7 to 8 minutes of a fight, thinking back through history, I don't know if there's a scarier man that's really stepped into the octagon. And, you know, for the longest time, it was just pure raw talent. And he's really started to develop some hands in boxing, and you really can see improvements from him. And I know a lot of people, including ourselves, that first sprawl in the Stipe fight, we were like, holy shit.
He circled around to Stipe's back like Brock Lesnar would in his fights, and we knew it was over at that moment.
Definite improvements, you're right. And that's kind of what worries me a little bit here, and why, just to reiterate, you said the decision-only line, I think, is the best play because Stipe exhausted Francis that first time with the wrestling. Gane's never really came out there with an all-out grappling-heavy approach, and if you plan to point fight for 25 minutes like you did Rosenstruik, like you did Volkov, you're playing with fire with Francis, you know, and even just to kind of dig into it a little bit more, Cyril Gane's going to throw the kicks, and you saw Francis just blitz Rosenstruik off the first kick he threw. In the Derek Lewis fight, you see Cyril Gane miss and get his back turned to Derek Lewis, who comes swinging at him and barely misses him. So, man, Francis is going to have his opportunities. I think it's smart to lay off. You know, Conor McGregor once said that precision beats power and timing beats speed. So I'm going to have to agree. I think Cyril Gane is the side here. He's seen Francis before, man. You know, it's not like he's stepping into the octagon for the first time with him like a lot of these other guys have.
Since Francis has moved with Eric Nicksick, his body composition has literally changed. Yeah. So although he hasn't really had the opportunity to showcase that he has, 3-4 rounds in him, this would be the opportunity for him to show it. You know, he really does have a full 5 rounds where he's not going to have to fend off takedowns, probably, you know, and maybe he will show that he can carry on that power into the later rounds.
I'm with you, man. So, again, pick is going to be Cyril Gane. I can never hate the fact that you get a knockout artist like Francis at plus money, but I think the best play is what we got so far. In the co-main event, flyweight strap is up for grabs. We have Brandon Moreno taking on Deiveson Figueiredo. Man, as much as I really love to have, you know, action on either one of these guys, because the big mid co-main event, we've seen it play out before, but as far as picking a side, I don't really know how committed I can get to really either side here. With Brandon Moreno, props to him because, you know, he's got one of the better stories in the game right now. Last one picked on the Ultimate Fighter, and then had to go through the ringer at flyweight, getting cut, then signed back again. Never really been happier for a guy to touch gold, to be honest with you. And as I say that, I'm also going to say that when I look through the list of champions, he's might be one of the rather less talented champions that we have, and I think he's more or less maybe just kind of a bad matchup for Deiveson Figueiredo here. And maybe it's a little bit of that Mexican heart that he's got in him, but he just doesn't go down to the power of Figueiredo like a lot of these other flyweights have, and he's shown to have been able to withstand, you know, that early rounds 1 and 2, and then start to come back and implement that wrestling. But I would be a fool to ignore the fact that the Deiveson Figueiredo that showed up in the first fight and the second fight, they were different, and it had to do with the fact, you know, the scale, man. He was like the second last one to weigh in on weigh-ins day, and he looked awful. And you know, I hate to say that camp change just makes all the difference, but he does look very good at fight ready. You saw what they did to Henry Cejudo, and a lot of science behind it, man. And the weight cut was a big part of Figueiredo that I think hindered his game at flyweight. And so if that's under control, I think him at plus money at plus 155 is a little bit wide. I could be kicking myself for it, but I think I'm going to go for Deiveson Figueiredo to get his belt back, man.
Dang. So spoiler alert, this is definitely my fight of the night right here, man. Watching Moreno's story, my girlfriend being so invested in him being the first Mexican-born champion, I've become extremely emotionally invested into this fight right here. And watching that promo, it actually brought me to tears. Like, they did such a good job. If you haven't seen it, go onto UFC's YouTube page and check out the Moreno-Figgy promo. But you're right, man. From what I can tell, putting all my bias aside, Figgy looks absolutely amazing on his social media, man. And outside of that weight cut, I do think that biggest factor is him switching over to fight ready. Henry Cejudo, me and you both, big fans of him. We know what he's capable of. And he seemed pretty convincing where he talked about training with Moreno in preparation for Demetrius Johnson and figuring out Moreno's strengths and weaknesses. That scared the piss out of me whenever he said it, man. Then on top of that, you look at Moreno. He's kind of in a position right now where he's being put in the spotlight in his home country. And, you know, the Legos, the Funko Pops, he's not the most mature fighter. I got to be honest with you. And I think that it could be a factor, you know, him not being as motivated. But he did bring that up specifically and say that he's working harder than ever. With an actual game plan, I think Figueiredo could present some new problems to Brandon, which is why I'm laying off of the fight just by picking a side. And really like the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 136 on FanDuel. That's probably what we're going to take. Like you said, Deiveson, you know, he brings the fucking power at 125. Sure. And I think that he has a lot of finishing upside with that power. But fuck, man. I want Moreno to get it done, and I think that if he does get it done, he'll eventually break him down like he did in the second fight. Realistically,
like when I look at this one, as long as it plays out on the feet, who do I favor in the striking department? And I think Figueiredo is the better striker. I do, and I think Brandon Moreno gets hit way too much for my liking, to be honest with you. And then when it comes to the grappling, Brandon's probably the clear better wrestler, but I really do like what I see from Figueiredo on the ground, and he's got a nice guillotine which can threaten sloppy takedown attempts. And just part of me thinks that weight cut being under control really can take his game to the next level. But you're right, it could be an absolute repeat of that second fight. I think we got the best play of it, not hitting the scorecards.
We're not sure about the bout order, but we think that the UFC would really be messing up if they didn't put these two on the main card. We have Ilia Topuria versus Charles Jourdain. And, man, Jourdain taking this fight on short notice is one of the ballsiest things I can think of. You know, he just fought out the last fight on his contract against Andre Ewell's a few weeks back and put on an excellent performance, was immediately re-signed.
Spartan kick.
And, yes, and he's got to be one of Dana's favorite fighters on the roster for making this fight happen. But he is stepping up against possibly the most hyped prospect in the UFC right now. I mean, you ask the common Twitter user, and they'd say that Ilia will be fighting for the title by next year. Odds makers aren't really giving Jourdain a chance here at plus 425, and it's hard to argue with him, man. You know, something that I do think that they're kind of overlooking is I think that Charles will have a significant height advantage here, but that only means so much whenever Ilia is the more technical striker, better on the ground, stronger fighter.
Dig into the body.
Man, you know, if Ilia wants to make a big impact on the division, he'll come in and get this done within a round. I think it's completely possible, but taking Ilia inside the distance at the minus 160s is probably how I'm looking at this fight. I just don't see Jourdain offering much for Topuria's offense.
I'm 100% with you, man. Ilia Topuria, 100% one of the people I put in parlays, and actually jumped on it early when it was like minus 390. Now it's like north of 500 in some places. You know, and I do want to mention this with Jourdain stepping in for Momsvar Evloev. We lost one of the better fights of the first quarter of 2022. I know with a lot of people that was one of the best fights looking forward to between undefeated prospects, and a fight that I honestly think was happening a little too soon, so it could be a blessing in disguise. And I think these guys 100% see each other down the road again. You talked about props to, props to both of them for, for Ilia for taking the fight, really for a fight that doesn't do much for him in terms of moving him up the rankings. But yeah, you're right, for Charles Jourdain throwing his name out there immediately and accepting this. I can't imagine there was a lot of people doing so. I think Charles Rosa threw his name out there and then immediately jumped on that TJ Brown opening. He was not about the Mobstar fight, or about the Topuria fight, and I don't blame him, to be honest. Topuria, he looks like the real deal, man. He looks like he's got the goods, and I was excited to see the Mobstar, a high-level wrestler test that of Ilia, because I feel like that's the one area we've yet to kind of see in the UFC or at a high level. But on the feet, these guys don't look like they have shit for him, and Jourdain, who is somebody who likes to get in those firefights, likes to push the pace and get in your face, he's going to give Ilia the type of fight that he wants to put on a classic show, man. And I think Charles Jourdain walking forward is just honestly going to get his ass whooped until he can't take it anymore. I really like Ilia Topuria to get the knockout here, but I think he's got a massive advantage on the ground too, so I'm not counting out the submission. I think you're looking at the best line, minus 160 of him just inside the distance. You can't expect Charles's body to be 100% fully healthy, either going the full hard 15 minutes just last month. So, yeah, Ilia Topuria, one of my favorite prospects, like even, his first fight with Yusuf Salal and stuff, taking a dog shot on him there. I really like what I see from him, and I think this is an easy fight, and he only loses it if he makes some stupid-ass mistake. Moving down through the card, we have Cody Stamann, who's taking on Said Nurmagomedov. Stamann, like you told me earlier, a little bit of a tricky spot. He's kind of passing up his prime, and now he's on an L2, and really needs to get back on track. And for him, he's taken a step down in competition outside of that top 10, 15 he's used to fighting, but I really don't know how much of a step down in actual competition he's taken here. What I've kind of noticed in looking through, and watching a lot of Cody's fights, whenever he is not the one who's just at the absolute clear grappling advantage, he really tends to struggle, because that's about all he really has to his game plan. And while Said is not your typical, Khabib Nurmagomedov with the all-out just dominant style of wrestling, I think he's 100% good enough and well-versed enough on the ground to hang with the relatively, kind of small and undersized bantamweight Cody Stamann. But as long as this fight stays on the feet, I think that's where you're going to see the clearest mismatch of this fight. I think Said is clearly the better striker than Cody. Whole lot of teep kicks from range and a bigger cage. I think he's going to be able to keep Cody at bay and threaten with stuff once Cody, being the smaller guy, has to close distance. Said's a very, very nice counter striker. It's Cody who's going to have to put himself in danger here, and I really like Said as this line's getting down to minus 180. I've even double dipped and played him again, so pick is going to be Said. I've talked about numerous times here in 2022. I don't like betting the striker, at a juice when he's fighting a guy who always comes in with a game plan. It reminds me of our last two times trying to bet Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But I think Said is the better fighter here, and I can't pass up, betting Nurmagomedov. If I lose that bet, I just lose that bet.
Yeah, so I think that it's a lot less about Stamann taking a step down in competition and more about Nurmagomedov taking a step up. Nurmagomedov is part of this newer Russian wave, and although he's been in the UFC since 2018, we've only been able to watch him 3 times since his debut, and we've gotten a mixed bag of performances. In his last fight against Mark Striegel, he did exactly what you expect from a minus 400 favorite. And this fight with Stamann is likely to prove to be his hardest matchup to date. I think you could even argue that it's harder than his Barcelo loss. And how are we supposed to have a good feeling about Nurmagomedov with how little we've seen him in the octagon? I will agree that Nurmagomedov is the more polished of the two striking, but Cody being a pure wrestler, I do think that he's going to have success, especially early, getting Said to the ground. And he'll likely be tested with the long limbs of Said. Said will probably be able to get up to his feet, but I think Stamann having that pure wrestling, it's enough to make me want to lay off. And I'm not planning on taking a stab at Stamann, but if the odds do keep going in Said's favor, shoot, if I could get Stamann at plus 200, I think that there's a lot of value there. You mentioned the tricky spot. Him being at 32 years old at this part in his career, he has to make a change. And I think that this is his easiest fight in a long time. So I think that there's room here for an upset, which is why I'm laying off, but I understand that you like Saeed in this spot.
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from as well, and I bring up that last point where here we are, a guy having to lay minus 180 on a striker who's at the clear wrestling disadvantage while he's fighting a guy who knows nothing but wrestling. So trying to be smart with our units in 2022, and I don't hate passing on this one.
This next fight takes place in the welterweight division where we see Michel Pereira versus Andre Fialho. Fialho? Michel, he's become more and more patient as a fighter since he's entered the UFC. Yeah. Every once in a while, he'll still throw those theatrical strikes, the backflip on Nico Price. Yeah. He's still got it in him. But I think that he's finally taming some of that explosiveness and energy and really starting to utilize his, the athleticism, the speed to win the fights and even outpoint his opponents on the judges' scorecards. He's been training out of Overcome Academy in Las Vegas, and it's really impressed me how he's transformed his game in such a short period of time, and he's still only 28 years old. I think that he has a pretty bright future ahead of him, especially if he kind of keeps his head on straight and doesn't go crazy before the fights. His opponent, another young prospect at only 27 years old, and he's got a couple of good UFC wins under his belt against guys like James Vick and his last fight against Stefan Sekulic. He has fallen victim to the guy who haunts my nightmares and Action Man Chris Curtis. He is absolutely whooped up on me these past years.
Clean my pockets.
Yes, man. But Andre is an absolute finisher. The finish that got him into the UFC against Stefan Sekulic, man, I mean, defending a takedown, and he's able to produce so much power with a short elbow inside the clinch. And I mean, he's training out of the best gyms available in Sanford MMA. I think that he could be a problem. I think both of us are kind of leaning towards this fight, not seeing the judges more than we are picking a side here. But I do think that Michel probably has the speed to beat Andre to the punch the majority of the time, and he'll get the nod. Yeah,
man. Took a whole lot of the words out of my mouth here. Michel Pereira was supposed to be fighting Muslim Salikov last week, so Fialho's stepping in here on short notice. And for as long as it lasts, I think it's going to be a good one. I really do. Priya, very talented, like you said, and finally starting to tame some of that wildness that cost him fights with Tristan Connolly and Diego Sanchez. And, dude, that's always in the back of my mind when you want to bag him as a massive favorite at minus 290, because sometimes when he's heavily favored, he doesn't seem to take it serious. Now he's in a pay-per-view aspect. Hopefully it's not a 7-minute walkout, theatrical performance before he gets there.
He's a minus 300 going into this one.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So if he lets that get to his ego and starts worrying more about entertaining these fans on Saturday than fighting, dude, he's got his hands full with Andre Fialho, who, dude, like, you mentioned his knockouts over Vic and Sekulic. For round one, this guy comes out like a bat out of hell with a ton of forward pressure, looks to get in your face and back you up against the fence, and he's going to be dangerous very, very early. But because he's taking this on short notice, like a lot of guys do, I expect a good, heavy gas tank in round one, but I do expect it to dip after that. As long as it stays on the feet, dude, I think Michel's clearly the better striker, and I think he's at such a big speed advantage here that once we do see Andre Fialho start to slow down, I think Pierre is just going to snipe this guy in round 2 or 3 and put him away. So I'm going to go, like you said, Michel Pereira TKO, and we're going to release there some money on the fight doesn't go the distance.
I like it.
Moving through the card, we're in the middleweight division where we see Rodolfo Vieira taking on Wellington Turman. Man, this is a tricky one, and I'm almost tempted to take another big dog shot on the plus 210 Wellington Turman. I think the odds makers are giving Rodolfo Vieira a little bit too much respect here. I'll be the first one to tell you, man, the jiu-jitsu background of this guy, it's almost unmatched by a whole lot of other guys on the roster, and 9 times out of 10 when you get you down to the mat, you end up tapping or you're going to sleep. But on the feet, it's an absolute work in progress. There's little to no striking that you see coming from him, and he openly admits to not liking to get hit, so not what I like to see. And for him to go out there and cover that price tag, he's going to have to go out there and do something to Wellington Turman and submit him early that's just not being done. He doesn't offer that same knockout threat that we saw, Bruno Silva do. And I'm just not sold on the odds here. And like I said, there are levels to the game, but I think we could see a repeat of that Fluffy fight. I think we with Wellington Turman training with Glover Teixeira, I know he's seeing high-level takedown attempts coming at him daily. And if he's able to work back to his feet, we could really see Vieira gas again. And then you want to say that Vieira, is all of a sudden a better striker and he maintained his gas tank in the Stoltzfus fight. But it's like, that's not Vieira's game. And when he's going to stay in that range and strike with people for 3 rounds, I'm taking a plus 210 dog opportunity there all day. And then the last thing I want to mention, I see people giving Wellington Turman flack for splitting with Sam Alvey. And, dude, who doesn't split with Sam Alvey? That dude's going up to light heavyweight, splitting with Dong Jung and who was Ryan Spann. It's like, I don't give Wellington Turman flack for doing that. He always makes fights tricky. So, yeah, I think you almost see this pretty similar, and I think we might come out taking another dog shot here.
Yeah, man. So I've cashed on my big fade on Rodolfo with Fluffy already. And like you said, I don't think that we can bank on the cardio issues as much as we did before. He has shown that energy conservation in his last fight, did keep it on the feet, developed a jab. So at least we're seeing improvements from the pure BJJ guy, But I do think that he'll get exposed soon. I'm not sure if Wellington's going to be the guy. But I do, like you mentioned, Glover being his training partner, I mean, to recreate high-level BJJ and the strength that Rodolfo brings to the table with his grappling, I don't think that there's a better guy to represent that. That split against Sam Alvey, the only reason why it was a split is because Turman was poking his eyes out. It wasn't like Turman didn't just beat him, because he did, It's... for Sam to be bitching about the win just because he got his eye poked, you're kind of looking at where Smiling Sam at is in his career right now. In Wellington's recent loss to Bruno Silva, he looked incredible until he got knocked out, he secured multiple takedowns, took the back, and then managed to get flatlined, man. I think at 25 years old, Wellington is going to have some amateurish mistakes. And I think that, taking a stab on him at plus 215 when he has the training partners, he has the experience at this higher level, and he's not fighting a pure striker that can knock him out. I think that there is more than enough reason to take a look at Wellington Turman at plus 2-1 odds.
I agree with you, man.
Our next fight takes place at 170 pounds, where we see newcomer Michael Morales taking on Trevin Giles. Man, I have an awful time trying to cap Giles, man. Yeah, whether it's for him or against him, I've just had some really bad luck. And his most recent fight against Duplessis, we tried to back him, and
he tried to fade Duplessis multiple times.
Yes, man, and Giles just lets us down. Duplessis shows up out of nowhere. Giles is up against a Contender Series graduate and teammate of Brandon Moreno and Michael Morales. Morales is pretty legit, man, and when I watch his tape back, he reminds me a lot of a young John Jones. He's so young and athletically talented that he's willing to try all these risky, unorthodox moves, and he's athletic enough to not really pay for them if they miss, and he can really catch you off guard if you're not prepared. At this point in the week, I don't really feel comfortable playing him at minus 140, but I do think that there'll be more and more people that start to pile on the Giles side, just seeing his UFC experience. So if that Morales line does kind of get towards the even money as the week goes on, I'm definitely going to look to play him. He has a really quick lead left hook, and he will resort to the wrestling if he feels like he has an advantage. I think Morales could come out here and whoop up on Giles, and it wouldn't surprise me a bit, but it also wouldn't surprise me if Giles pulls another one off and kind of spits in my face.
Yeah, I don't like playing the Contender Series debutante under the bright lights for the first time at minus 140, and that's kind of what's holding me back. But I think I agree with you, man. I like Michael Morales here. It's a big thing to note that you mentioned this fight's at welterweight, and Giles is usually a middleweight, so we've seen him having to drop down to welterweight. It is, I looked, the first time in his career. And not only that, in an interview that I was watching, he said he had a little setback over the holidays. I'm guessing ate a little bit too much or something, and I'm kind of curious to see what he looks like on the scale. You're talking not about a 10-pound difference here. You're talking about a 15 from middleweight to welterweight there. So I think it could be a big factor, as if, maybe if I do get a play in on Michael Morales on Saturday. But big upset on the Contender Series. You mentioned all the good things about him, man. Great frame, young prospect. I love his double jab. He likes to stay behind, and that right hand covers a ton of space. And he can fight backwards, and he whenever he gets his backed up against the cage, he'll throw that Superman punch, And, man, it was Duplessis coming off the cage with the right hand that caught Giles last time out. So I like Michael Morales here. When you look, when you hear their commentating and stuff about him, his parents are lifelong judoka practitioners. His mom was in the Beijing Olympics for judo. And at one time, Michael Morales was on the Ecuador national wrestling team. So not only do I like all the, the physical frame and striking, but I think he's got the wrestling background to be able to take this part-time police officer down. Police officers, I think, are about to be 0-2 in this year. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Michael Morales. It could potentially be a decision, but I do really like what I see from the prospect.
It honestly sounds a lot like we should make a fucking bet on Michael Morales, man.
We might end up doing it. Yeah, we really much might.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on down, we come to Matt Frevola taking on Genaro Valdez. Frevola usually doing a whole lot of work at Gracie Tampa down south, but when you look on his Instagram, he looks like he's up north at Longo MMA doing a whole bunch of this camp here. And I told the story about sitting behind his wife and stuff at 236 when he beat Jalen Turner. So it's like I really root for a whole lot of success for Matt, and now he's taking on another debutant, and I can't hope but more success for him this time around than a 7-second knockout loss. But not saying that fight goes the same way. But, man, looking back at the Terrence McKinney fight, that's a hard fight for Frevola to take on short notice. You got a very athletic guy who's got you outmatched in speed and striking, and also a damn good wrestler, which Matt is tends to rely on. When I move down to break down this fight, I feel like it can almost be a thank you fight for taking that Arman fight on short notice, for taking that Terrence McKinney fight on short notice, and being that company man can sometimes reward you. And if Frevola doesn't show up and throw the fight IQ out the window and decide to get in a firefight, I think we could see what we call a vet lesson incoming. Here Valdez, he is 10-0, so I give him his props there. But a lot of these guys really hasn't beat a whole lot of guys worth noting. He's a friend of Brandon Moreno, so it's no shock that he's getting his opportunity on this card here. In his last fight worth noting on the Contender Series, he's fighting Patrick White, where he's a -500 favorite and gets into an absolute unnecessary brawl with the Alaskan FC product. Not what I want to see from a 10-0 -500 fighter, but when Brandon Moreno is the champ and cornering you, I'm sure it has a lot of say-so there. So again, this is a fight where I think Matt Frevola, it's his fight to lose. If he loses this one, it's because he goes out there and gets in a firefight with Valdez. I've seen on the regional scene him taken down numerous times, and I think that's how we see Matt Frevola take this one on Saturday, man.
So, I'm just not convinced of the skill set that Frevola has, especially coming off those back-to-back losses. I know that they were both taking on short notice, so it's hard to
knock him for him.
Knock him too bad. But even before he was taking those L's, I thought he was somebody with limited abilities inside the octagon. He's able to exploit fighters who have that subpar wrestling, but even in the fights where he finds success, he ends up making those a whole lot closer than they should be. You look at his record in the UFC, and he's 2-3-1. And I think it's a product of his small frame for the lightweight division and his holes in his striking game. Like you said, Genaro, training partner of Brandon Moreno, undefeated 10-0, and has literally walked through all of his opponents. You look at that last fight, and yes, he brought the war. He has zero clue what conserving energy is, and I'm 100% here for it, man. Valdez, he does get it done on the feet most of the time, but his ground game, it's up to snuff. He has been taken down in his past fights, but he does have 3 submissions on his record, and I have seen him utilize his wrestling to get to the ground, which is something I'm excited to see how it matches up against somebody who I think has mid-tier wrestling himself in Frevola. With the uncertainty that kind of surrounds Frevola at this stage of his career, I think it's a bad move to lay 2-1 favorites on him. But, an experienced fighter like Valdez, he's training with guys like Brandon Moreno. I think that he will make significant improvements once he enters the UFC and sees those upper echelon fighters. This is a really great test for Valdez coming into the UFC because it doesn't get much easier than Frevola. But I would agree that Frevola has the upper hand in experience, and this being a full camp for him, I could see him coming out here and getting the win, but I'm just a little hesitant to play him at the price tag he sits at.
any thought on playing fight doesn't go the distance. Sits anywhere between like -105 and -150. So if we were to get closer to that -105 range, I don't hate that at all.
I don't hate that at all either. I think the only way that it doesn't hit is if Frevola wrestle fucks him, which I think will probably be his game plan.
Jalen Turner, Luis Pena,
right?
Yeah, I agree. The finishing upside is more on Genaro or whatever his name is, Genaro Valdez, to come out here and get the knockout. So maybe we just lay off this one.
Our next fight takes place in the bantamweight division, where we see Tony Gravely taking on Saimon Oliveira. Gravely's someone who's left a bad taste in my mouth since the last time we backed him against Nate Maness. He's another one of those guys that seems to be doing great until he dies midway through the fight and gets finished. Gravely, he's somebody who needs to get his grappling going to open up the rest of his game, and he does a great job of that, averaging 5.5 takedowns per fight. But man, if he does get that grappling going, he also has to battle his gas tank, because halfway through the fight, he really will drop off. And, you know, if Oliveira makes him work for these takedowns, I do think that he could come on towards the end. I don't know too much about Oliveira here, but like most Oliveiras we know, he does have a great grappling game with 7 submission wins. But don't let that take away from the Muay Thai skills that he also possesses. This fight, I said this earlier, it kind of reminds me of Gravely versus Geraldo de Freitas, where you had a wrestler versus a primary grappler. But Oliveira has much better striking than Geraldo de Freitas did have, and that might have been all that de Freitas needed to get the nod over Gravely in their split decision loss. Because of the inconsistencies of Gravely, I don't love laying -250, which is ultimately why I'm laying off this fight. I think that there's a lot better spots on this card. But if, gun to head, I do think that Gravely has the skills to win this fight. It only being 3 rounds, it works in his favor. So final pick, I'll go with Gravely, but I don't love it at the price tag.
Yeah, Saimon Oliveira, man, ton of submissions on the record, constantly threatening with the guillotine. And that, that can go one of two ways, because you got Gravely, like you talked about, averaging 5.5 takedowns landed per 15 minutes and constantly shooting takedowns. He's going to give Oliveira the openings to, for those front chokes to maybe be successful. But it also could end up with Saimon Oliveira just on his back with a heavy wrestler on top. And you talked about his Muay Thai background. That lead leg, it's always busy, man. Ton of kicks to his game. And he's super, super tall in his stance. So I don't like 2 things. I don't like his ability to defend the body. He was constantly getting tore up to the body in the Contender Series. And such a high guard, man. His hands are too high to be able to get in on the legs on the takedowns from Tony Gravely. So maybe I'm thinking too much into it, giving Saimon Oliveira a chance, because I do think that he's going to find himself on the back. Looking through his regional tape, there's plenty of times where he is on his back against far, far worse competition. But you're right. What kind of wants me to stay away from it is Gravely's style of fighting that he always relies on can also be a detriment, and cause him to lose. So I get the hesitancy to lay -240, but I'm a little bit higher on Tony Gravely to win here, I think, than you are. I just don't think Saimon Oliveira has seen the level of competition that Tony Gravely has, nor does he have the level of wrestling, which I think is just going to ultimately be the deal breaker here, the difference maker.
You talk about the guillotine being an opening for Oliveira. It kind of reminds me of the Gerald Meerschaert-Bartosz Fabinski fight, where you knew the takedown was coming and you knew that Meerschaert had the guillotine in his back pocket, and you see that happening. As if he's been practicing it like we think that he should have, that will be an opening for Oliveira, and I wouldn't be surprised.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think that happened with Meerschaert's back up against the fence.
It did.
And Saimon Oliveira has like 3 guillotines with his back on the fence. So Tony Gravely, I literally have it in my notes here, cannot be lazy on up against the cage, because Saimon will jump guillotine. Tony Gravely is a little bit exhausted and has a little bit of quit on him. Yeah, I don't hate you kind of talking me out of laying off of this one.
Our next fight is in the flyweight division, where we see UFC newcomer Jasmine Jasudavicious taking on Kay Hansen. This fight is a super interesting one. It's one that we've already placed a bet on. We did end up taking Jasmine at +210, I believe. And just a simple breakdown, I think that she's a much bigger fighter. She offers a similar skill set in wrestling that Kay Hansen does. And she has 10 years of experience on her. Now, she hasn't been fighting those full 10 years, but her having the wrestling background, having good coaching in Niagara top team, I do think that she offers enough for me to take a stab on her at this low-level women's fight.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Kay Hansen very well could be the bed shitter this week. When I first looked at it, that was honestly like one of the first things that like blew my mind when I went to see the odds, was seeing Kay Hansen such a big favorite here. I know she's fought Erin Blanchfield, and she's got 2 UFC appearances under her belt, what I think should be 2 UFC wins under her belt. But now she's going up a weight class to flyweight with a grappling heavy approach, and usually size in women's MMA is sometimes enough to do it. And if this fight plays out on the feet, I think Jasmine's the better striker. I like her. I like what I see from her. A ton of kicks to keep at range. She loves her jab, and that's the perfect tools when you're the bigger fighter. And Kay is going to have the one that close the distance here. To Kay's defense, though, she's been out for a little over a year now, and she is very young, and she's got a damn good jiu-jitsu game. So she's going to be evolving, and I expect better Kay Hansen every single time she steps in the octagon. But I thought that bully style of wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, that she wants to get you down, it's much better suited for strawweight, where she's the bigger girl here, and now
Lupi Godinez.
Exactly, and it's funny that you bring that up, because it reminded me of Lupi fighting Luana Carolina and stuff. And again, another plus 200 dog, when she's the bigger girl and the smaller girl. Her path to victory is to grapple here, and like I said, sometimes strength is enough to do it. In Women's A and Jasmine on the Contender Series, man, she had a strong body lock, nice trips. Yeah, Kay Hansen I think is going to get upset by the newcomer Jasmine Jourdain, and plus 220 I think is what we got on that, and I think that's coming down. So I think we've done our job, and yeah, man, low level women's MMA, give me that big underdog.
Love it.
Moving down through the card, we're in the bantamweight division, where we see Raoni Barcelos taking on Victor Henry. I do believe we broke this fight down just before the year ended, so I don't know how much time I'll spend on it. I'll be honest with you, surprised that it even stayed together. Barcelos at his career, the competition he's already fought, Timur Valiev, it's kind of a meaningless fight for him. He's actually been matched up previously with Cody Stamann, who's on this card, Merab, Rafael Sunsao. So again, kind of a meaningless fight for him, but hopefully one I think he can get back on track pretty easily. Henry's a newcomer, but he's like the same age as Raoni, so he's not really some debutante, some young guy with a ton of skills. He's been fighting all over the world. He's notched a couple good wins here and there over some guys we've seen on the roster, but no one better that are on the level of Raoni. And again, we've already broken it down, man. Where's Henry better? Nowhere. He's not a better striker. He's not better on the mat. Maybe he has a better gas tank if Raoni slows down. I don't know. Raoni inside the distance. Raoni for the second leg of our parlay with Ilia. Yeah, Barcelos, maybe.
We see this the exact same way. This is probably the easiest fight to call on the card for me. Barcelos is somebody whose skill set I truly believe in, and if it weren't for his age, I would actually say that he could make a serious title run. But for now, he's battling for a ranking, and I think he has an upper hand on anybody outside of the top 15. He has incredible striking along with a decorated ground game, and he should be able to take this fight wherever he wants with Henry. I've seen Victor get taken down by worse opposition. I've seen him get into brawls that I didn't really think looked great. And if he fights sloppy against somebody like Barcelos with the power and just high-level jiu-jitsu that he has, I think that he'll probably be waking up looking at the ceiling. I've got Barcelos inside the distance, and then not to mention Henry's taking this on 5 days' notice. It's a recipe for disaster for Henry.
I do have Barcelos submission plus 550. I think that's worth noting. But Henry has never been finished before, and so I think we maybe are doing the right thing and just taking that money line and parlaying it with, like I said, Ilia, Topuria, two people that we are very, very confident in. Going down through the card, almost finished here. We're in the women's strawweight division. We see Vanessa Demopoulos and Silvana Gomez-Juarez. Man, if you were not already interested in this fight, we're going to put the casual cap on it for next week. Honestly, though, outside of this, who's wearing this hat next week, I don't give two shits about this fight. I think it's extremely low level. I don't think either girl has just a downright clear advantage in this one, and I think we're seeing Silvana Juarez, Gomez, whatever, get grappled by Lupi, and we're going to see Vanessa Demopoulos come in here with the same game plan. So I think that's where we're kind of seeing the love come in on Demopoulos' side. But I can never bet this girl is a minus 140 favorite over anybody. I think we're seeing Silvana just not be able to give a good account of herself on short notice up against Loopy, who's a far better wrestler, a far stronger person than Vanessa Demopoulos. I saw Silvana get up multiple times from the Loopy takedowns before getting submitted. It's a close fight, and again, trying to be smart with my units, not betting this fight, but I think Silvana Gomez-Juarez is going to win this one 29-28 on the scorecards.
Yeah, man. So we see this one differently. That's why we got the casual cap on it.
Take a little monster.
You're right. This is as low level as it gets, man. It's kind of the UFC's obligatory bout that they have to make as a repayment for both these girls taking fights on short notice.
Yeah, I'm going to get beer during this one.
Yes, for sure. I always thought Vanessa Demopoulos was better than her record or her reputation would make you think. She's fought in an excellent organization since turning pro in LFA and fought that higher level of competition, even on the amateur level against Chuk and against Cheyenne Vlismas. But now that she's had a full camp at Fight Ready, I am expecting some legitimate improvements in her game. She's definitely not the most technically sound fighter, but she does have a clear advantage in the ground here. Her opponent, Juarez, she trains with Brandon Moreno at Interim Gym and has solid pressure, decent boxing, but I don't think that she's going to be taking Vanessa out with any of these punches. Demopoulos, one thing is durable, man. Like she takes a fucking beating when she's out there. And I do think that Vanessa, like you said, kind of offers a very similar game plan as Loopy did. And we've kind of already seen how Silvana does struggle against that type of fighter. And at 37 years old, I think she's in over her head against a little monster here. So I am going to take Vanessa Demopoulos, but the only thing I'd put on it is the casual cap. I wouldn't put any money on that.
Absolutely.
First fight of the night and last fight that we'll be covering, we go into the welterweight division where we see Jack Della Maddalena taking on Dead Game Pete Rodriguez. This is going to be an absolute banger. We know exactly why the UFC put this to start off the card, and both of us think that it's not going to see the end of the second round. Yeah. We're looking at the under 1.5 here. Both these guys are welcome the war whenever they fight, and just judging by Pete's record, he's going in there to get the job done in the first 30 seconds, and he's willing to die in there. So I definitely think that this one won't be seeing the judges. We're already on the under 1.5. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, man. I like it. I really like that under 1.5. This was the last fight I'd gotten to, so you had already thrown that bet out to me, as a little bone. And man, when I started digging into it, I was like, hell yeah. I said probably won't get a good line on it, and then minus 115, so 100% probably going to play that under 1.5. Pete Rodriguez is fucking game. The dude has power in his hands, and he sets it up really good, man. He walks you down. A lot of his fights were in a ring, so he puts guys in the corner. Sets up his right hand really well, but a lot of these guys he's fighting, I will say, man, there's some scrubs, but he does have a pretty lengthy amateur background, so with 4 fights, it's just not all that he's got. I will have to say, he conserves his energy to an extent. A lot of these guys are just so bad that they go down, with his power. But I can't expect with Jack Della Maddalena's pressure and forward style of brawling that Pete's gas tank is going to be great come round 2 and 3. With Jack, I just saw him go 15 full minutes against Angalusa, who's a Sanford MMA, another pretty good prospect. Like I talked about, he likes getting in their face, and he will dig to the body with his volume. And so I like what I see out of this guy, but he's 100% willing to take a punch. And if Pete steps off to their side and lands one of those right hands, I could see Jack Della Maddalena going down as well. So I think I'm going to go with the favorite here. I think he's more equipped, down the stretch to win the fight, but I think we're going to put a unit on that under 1.5 to kick off the pay-per-view.
And screw laying minus 350 on somebody like Della, who is going to walk into the war that
and is a Contender Series debutant. It wouldn't be smart to put that in a parlay or lay that straight. So give me some violence to kick off tonight.
Love it.
That finishes up all 13 fights for UFC 270, first pay-per-view of 2022. To recap some things real quick, like we always do, we're going to put the cap on the line for, probably the most interesting fight on the whole card.
We got Big Tits McGee versus Little Monster.
Little Monster, baby. Let's go. Add some extra heat onto that fight there. But for a fight of the night, man, if you had to pick one, the people need to pay attention for.
I said it earlier in the podcast. It has got to be the Moreno-Figgy trilogy fight, man. I think that is something that could headline a pay-per-view if it wanted to, but I'm more than happy to take another fight on top of that.
For a guy who used to shit on the flyweight division all the time, hey, you seem to like that fight
That's
a lot.
true. That's true.
For me, I'm going to go with Michel Pereira and Andre Fialho. I think as long as that lasts, it's going to be a barn burner. Fialho's got, on short notice, what I don't think to be a full 3 rounds in him. I think he's going to come out hard, and Michel Pereira speaks for himself. He's always entertaining, so I think that's going to be a damn good fight where we see a finish. And if there's a fighter, everybody needs to watch.
I'm kind of jumping on board with everybody else on Twitter. Ilia Topuria is the fighter to watch, man. He could definitely break out as a superstar with a finish over Charles Jourdain, who just had an amazing performance a few weeks ago. So I think it's all Ilia's fight card to make a huge breakout.
Yeah, he seems like he has all the goods and all the tools to go to the top. For me, I'm going to go with Figueiredo, man. For a dominant champion, I'm ready to see if Brandon Moreno just has his number or if that weight cut really hindered that game in that second fight so much. And it's not just a better weight cut this time around. It's at fight ready. It's scientific weight cutting. It's Henry Cejudo. It's not flying from Brazil to the United States on fight week anymore. He's a plus 155 dog, and I think he's getting a bit disrespected there. So my eyes are going to be on Figueiredo in the co-main event on Saturday. Give the people your underdog.
An underdog, man. We're getting Francis Ngannou at plus 135 right now. That's incredible, man. And I think, in hindsight, if that fight plays out with Francis getting a KO, we'll look foolish not taking Francis Ngannou at underdog odds when he was just a minus 155 to John Jones.
Yeah.
When that, I just don't see Francis Ngannou being an underdog to anybody. If anything, it should be a pick'em fight.
And I'm with you. It's like, for me, when I look at the line, it's like it's almost justified to me because all the facets of the game lean to Cyril Gane. But at heavyweight, where power matters the most, and you can get away with just having power, it's really hard to count Francis out, especially at a plus 135. So I get you. For me, I'm going to go with Wellington Turman. I'm kind of jumping on board with you and trying to fade Rodolfo Vieira. I'm convinced that Turman sees the same looks in training camp and can survive long enough. To maybe even see the same type of gas tank dump that we saw from Rodolfo. And then if we see Rodolfo strike for 3 rounds, that's just not his game, man. So,
right.
I think there's almost any middleweight in the UFC is going to beat Rodolfo in a pure striking battle. So at plus 200, give me Turman and give me Jasmine Jourdain. What about a prop?
The prop bet, it's probably going to be Ilia Topuria inside the distance.
I like that one.
I think Jourdain's taking this fight on short notice is
not 100% healthy either.
Not 100% healthy. It's awesome for him, but it's a bad move for his career, and I think he's probably going to get hurt pretty badly on Saturday.
I like it, but I don't like it. Yeah, I want Ilia Topuria finish here, and the body shots are my favorite. I'd love to see that again. Prop for me, you're not getting a good line on it. You're going to pay minus 400, but give me Gane decision only. Like
Safe.
I said on Twitter, back the Brinks truck up. Come main event time. I'm probably going to empty out my whole bankroll on that, to be honest with you. I don't think Francis is equipped here to win 5 rounds. He can't win 3 versus Derek Lewis. He's not winning 5 against some guy who I think has way more tools. And odds are I'll probably get that money back. But,
right.
If not, hell, I made a fourth of what I just put in my bankroll, so I like it. Best bet for you?
My best bet is the co-main event, not seeing the judges. You can get it at minus 136 on FanDuel, which is by far the best line. And like I said, I think Moreno has Figgy's number, and if he doesn't, I think Figgy's going to catch him with one of those huge right hands.
Yep.
So I like this fight. In hindsight, it's a 125er fight, and I'm picking the under, which probably isn't the smartest thing, but styles make matchups, and I think that this is a spot where we could exploit a line.
I like it, man. For me, again, a little bit of juice, man. And if you can find any way to put Barcelos in a parlay, I think the dude is an absolute lock. It almost is, like I said, a meaningless fight to me for him. He should be fighting somebody so much better than Victor Henry, but I'm a little hesitant to put that inside the distance just because Henry's never been finished before. So I think if you can put Barcelos in your parlays of anybody on the UFC fights, any football team playing this week, anything, I think Barcelos is going to be a lock on Saturday. I appreciate you guys tuning in. First pay-per-view of 2020. We got UFC 270. 2 big title fights up for grabs. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see y'all next week.
Peace.